by popping. Foundational. Shade bearing. Wow factor. Colorful. Pollinating. Evergreen. Multi-seasonal. Welcome to the
Joyful Homestead Memorial Garden Show. What do you think? Pretty good, huh? Pretty good title?
Well, so wait a minute. If it's a memorial garden, wouldn't it have to mean that I had passed away in order for you to call it that?
Yeah, I don't want that. How
Well,
about
I'm
this?
glad to hear that.
Yeah. How about this? Okay, I got one. The Joyful Homestead Garden Spectacular.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. Spectacular, I think, would really adequately describe a perennial garden because I have this beautiful flash of color and display all season long every single year. Whereas I'm gonna let you get back to the backbreaking seeding, reseeding work of the veggie garden.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, see you later.
Bye. And now that I have the floor all to myself, let me officially welcome you to our perennial garden. We've done so much talking on this channel about the gardening we do as far as veggies and herbs, but flowers are amazing. Flowers are beautiful. And this is a gigantic garden. It's more than 22 feet long and it is 100% perennial. We chose as the foundation for this gigantic garden 2 gigantic bushes. So these willows are gorgeous. They start out in the early spring with green leaves, and then they turn to a variegated green and white color. And then later in the season, the ends of each of these is going to be tipped in pale pink. So it's fun, it keeps changing. And then in the winter, when it loses all its leaves, all of the structure, the branches, you just leave them as they are, and they're a dark red color. So they still have a presence, even all during the winter. Then I prune them at the very end of winter, and then it starts all over again. So basically, these 2 bushes fulfill multiple things on my list of must-haves for a perennial bed. It has multi-season interest. There is something to look at through the winter structurally. It doesn't just disappear. And also, this has the component of providing shade on the other side. Part of the reason that we put these up was because the pasture behind us is where the donkeys and the sheep would hang out often, and so they can stand here on the other side and get some shade during the day. Plus, honestly, it provides some privacy because there's another farm beside the pasture, and so we get a little bit more screening here on our property from the next property over. Pops of color are everywhere. I love these 3 bushes all in a row, just gorgeous. This is my miniature rose and my drift rose, both of which bloom starting at early spring and all the way through the summer. This one, it's a funny thing about this drift rose. It starts out, if you can see, yellow, and then as it gets bigger, it gets more white. That's why they call it the popcorn color, because you think, yellow that pops into white popcorn, right? And then the more exposure that your bush has to the sun, a lot of times these drift rose start to turn pink. So, hey, how fun is that? That's got 3 colors to it. And then the last one down there, that is my salvia. That starts about now. It's really just kind of popping here in the last week, and it is going to go all the way through to early fall. The only downside of my salvia is that is not going to have any presence during the winter. It's going to completely die out, and in the late winter you cut down all of those stems and then it starts to grow back up. But what we decided to do is in that same place plant bulbs for daffodils, so that in the early spring, the daffodils pop up, then they die off, and then up comes the salvia. So pretty fun, multi-seasonal. And just look at the big, beautiful specimen at the end of this flower garden. I love this. This is the bridal wreath spirea. You may be familiar with the spirea, and there are a lot of different varieties of them. This one is a big showy bunch of white clusters of flowers, and they just have a cascading look to them. Dan and I used to drive along and see these at the edges of woods and the edges of meadows and think, who planted them and where can we get one? So finally, now a couple years in, we've gotten this one really mature and in a really good spot. It's fantastic for pollination on our property. Right now I can see just tons of insects, little bees all over this. So this will bloom for quite a while yet, which is very helpful for the farm here. In a perennial garden, I cannot overemphasize the importance of something evergreen. My myrtle right here is my evergreen, and I have 2 of them. They're always going to look exactly like this all year long, with the addition of tiny little blossoms in the summer. So I've got my pops of color here. I've got the winter presence of the willow with the real pretty skeletal dark red structure, but this is always green and gorgeous. So consider what you have available in your climate, in your growing zone that's evergreen, to add in to your perennial bed. Check out this end of the garden. Lots going on here. This is the other end of my second willow bush. Over here to my right is our peony. Giant, gorgeous blossoms. So quite a showstopper, but unfortunately only blossoming for about 2 weeks. So when you're considering perennial gardens, if there's something you just really love, but it's short-lived, go for it anyway. The rest of the season, it's just a green bush, and I'm good with that because it's a presence there. Then under me, and right in front of that, is the spiderwort. These lovely purple blooms. They're kind of like the daylilies in that they open up every morning, and then by the afternoon they have closed up, and the next day you get another show. So these are also multipliers. That's why we have so many of these all over the property, because they throw off the little baby plants, you divide them out and plant them someplace else. So that's something else to consider when you're doing perennial beds. Can you save money by getting plants that will multiply for you? Another multiplier is the catmint. This started out as 3 little sprigs here at the corner and has grown and taken over this corner, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. It is thriving in part shade from the crabapple tree behind me, which is perfect for this plant. That's something to consider when you're planning out your perennials. Do you have full sun? Do you have part sun? Do you have too much shade for some of your things? And with this garden, we have some of each because of the tree behind me. So that's something that we had to keep in mind when we planned out our plants. So now, if you see here, I kept these so that you could see where we had daffodils. So at the corner here in early spring, the daffodils exploded, and that looked gorgeous, and then they died off. The blooms were spent. We kept these because you want them to continue to draw nutrients for the bulbs down under the ground. And then in the meantime, the catmint was springing up. So again, multi-seasonal, early spring, and then this is late spring and all summer long. That wraps up the tour, friends. I hope that the tour of my perennial garden was helpful for you. Food for thought, gave you a couple of principles to think about. The fun thing for me about perennial gardening is that it's so much like my decor inside. You know, if you watch our channel, that I've done a few decor videos, and this is like an extension of decor. On the outside, the beauty, the texture, the color, it's all there. And the fun thing is that it just doesn't cost very much, because once you buy the perennial, you enjoy it for years and years. So happy planting, friends. See you next time.